Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero. Our guest today is Michael Gaston. He's a journeyman actor on and off Broadway and on the big and small screens who is typically hired for his command presence. He's been in dozens of movies and TV shows you'd recognize, usually playing the guy our hero has to play against to go rogue and get the bad guy. You know, the by-the-book precinct captain who better not have to talk to you again or it's your gun and your badge and your ass is out of here, detective. He's shared the screen, often nose-to-nose with smoke and spit coming out, with Tom Hanks, Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert DeNiro, Harvey Keitel, Sylvester Stallone, Ray Liotta, Mel Gibson, Gary Sinise, Jeffrey Wright, Josh Brolin, Richard Dreyfuss, Delroy Lindo, James Gandolfini. The list goes on and on and on. He's delivered those performances and many others with much more nuance than I'm implying, with guys at the helm to include Steven Spielberg, Ron Howard, Oliver Stone, Ridley Scott, Peter Berg, and Ang Lee. He's got world-class chops and a reputation of professionalism that puts him on the rosters of the best and the biggest. He's also a homer. Born in Walnut Creek, grew up in Benicia. He sat down with Pete to talk about when Benicia finally got a Taco Bell. Not really. He gives us some insight about how he's built such an outstanding career, one brick, that is one script, one role, one line at a time. And you're about to find out that he might be the nicest guy you'll ever meet in show business or otherwise. Now, obviously, if you listen to the Break It Down show, you care about craft and reaching the highest level of whatever it is you do by doing the work and making the sacrifices, and we applaud you for it. So I'm going to ask you for two things to help us further the causes of our brethren and our sistren, if that's a word, you know what I mean. First thing is that you go out and you support the charities you care about by donating some money to keep them going and by volunteering your time and a little elbow grease. Now, around here, we support Save the Brave, and you can give them your support too at savethebrave.org. We also support the SEAL Veterans Foundation, and you can read about what they do and support them at sealveteransfoundation.org. In fact, Pete is doing the Coronado SEAL Memorial Swim on Saturday, September 21, to benefit the families of Naval Special Warfare operators who have made the ultimate sacrifice to defend our freedom. These organizations get our support. We'd love it if you'd support them too. Again, savethebrave.org or sealveteransfoundation.org. But really, do whatever it is you love doing and do a little more of it. You got a few more reps for the causes that you love. Pete is supporting sealveteranfoundation.org in a Sangha, and that's always fun. Second thing I'm going to ask you to do is even easier. Support the Break It Down show with a 5-star rating and a short review. Like, these guys will get in Mel Gibson's face too, just like Michael Gaston. But not DeNiro, because you don't get in DeNiro's face. See? Easy. Not as easy as Michael Gaston makes it look, though. He's a true professional at the height of his powers. We're very proud to have him on the show, and we know you're going to love him. We love him too. Here's our guest today, Michael Gaston.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland. This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is Michael Gaston, and you're listening to The Break It Down Show.
And now, The Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yeah, Michael Gaston is a, I hate to have to say this, but he is a legit actor. I mean, it's not someone who like works at Arby's part-times and goes on casting calls. Like, Michael stays busy, more than 6 projects a year all the time. So he's a legit actor in his own right, does all kinds of things you heard of. I'll go through that stuff in a second. But the coolest thing is that through my people in Benicia, and I think it was Sean Smith, you graduated several years before, I even got to high school. So we're, almost 2 full high school generations apart, but still from the same small town. My daycare was over by where you grew up. I rode bikes in the park by your house and jumped over a car one day. And it's fun, man, to connect on these things. And yeah, we'll talk about acting because obviously, look, this is some of the stuff that Michael's done. He's been on Chicago PD. He was in, The Blue Bloods, Bones, Yeah, I can go on and on and on. Jack Ryan, the new Jack Ryan show. He's been in movies. He's been on Jag, The Sopranos, Body of Lies, Wonderland, which is a recent one, Double Jeopardy, which I loved. Dude, you've been in so many things. Hackers. I'm just picking spots from throughout the list. It's legit work. And you seem to play some kind of institution. You were in W with Oliver Stone, that movie, and Body of Lies. Bridge of Spies, a movie I loved with Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg. It was great movies. Inception. So, dude, first off, wow, holy shit. It's really fantastic to talk with you. But also, holy shit, you come from Benicia, and who knew,
Yeah, there's not, there isn't quite the long history of actors in the theater from Benicia as, say, London or other places around the world. We're not really known for cranking out the actors in Benicia, California.
Yeah, but
I don't know what we're known. I don't know what we're known for. But,
well, good hardworking folk. We're so for folks.
Yeah, sure.
The town. By the way, you've not been back for a while. First Street has grown up into just maybe the best First Street in all of the Bay Area. I know that's bold to say, but it's it's oriented right towards the water, and it's just gorgeous now. I mean, really.
Yeah. When I was a kid, growing up, First Street was sort of, or Main Street, we sort of called it both things. I spent a lot of time cruising Main Street in my '69 GTO that we bought from my next door neighbor for $750, and I would cruise it up and down Main Street. There was one movie theater that never played anything that was first run. It was owned by the corrupt mayor. There's still probably a lot of people from his family there, but he was corrupt. His name was Lemus, and his two dwarf sisters ran the concession stand. Now that's I'm not making that up. It was right out of a David Lynch film. That's what was going on in Benicia. That's what there was. And then we would go down to the end of the pier, which was just rocks. It was just a rock pier, and past the old railroad station and go out to the end of it. And that's where you would go and, drink what you weren't supposed to drink and kiss who you weren't supposed to kiss and all that kind of thing. Yeah. That's what was going on out there.
Yeah, well, it's grown up quite a bit. That theater now shows nothing ever, and no one seems to know how to get it off the ground. It's such a great spot, though. And then that whole pier thing has been built up into like a fishing area, and if you want to drink and smoke and kiss who you're not supposed to drink, smoke, and kiss with, you have to go, somewhere else out in the industrial park maybe, or out on Lake Herman Road. Lake Herman Road, no longer scary. So... yeah, it's funny.
Used to have the football team would get together and we'd go out and drink beer out by the Camel Barns. The Camel Barns?
Yeah.
I don't know how interesting this will be to anybody who's not from Benicia, but that's what we used to go on.
Yeah, but this is fun, and we do. First Street is the actual name of the street, but nobody in town calls it that. At least not from Old Town. We call it Main.
Right.
I'm gonna cruise Main, and we cruised Main too. You guys cruised Main in the era like just after American Graffiti too. So what a cool thing to be doing, like that whole just connecting with time like that. It's super neat, man.
Yeah, well, there just wasn't anything else to do. being honest, there just wasn't much to do. Like I say, there was no bowling alley or mini golf, or it was just like, all right, well, what do? You sort of like, all right, you could sort of, it's where you found your little community for whatever that was worth. And occasionally there'd be hoodlums in from Vallejo or Martinez would come over and cause a ruckus, but basically that was it.
So this is I want to get into the acting stuff for a little bit, because old home stuff, obviously we can get back into that any moment, but first off, you're a huge dude for an actor. I mean, most actors are 5'7", 5'8", 5'9", and they're lying at 5'9". You're 6'3", so you must bump your head into stuff, and
Yeah, I would. I mean, the sort of cliche about sort of a lot of the leading men, Al Pacino, Dustin Hoffman, Robert Redford. They were not all big guys, but you'd be surprised. There's quite a range out here, and I'm definitely one of the bigger people around. And sometimes you go to audition for something with a casting director who doesn't know you. Doesn't happen so much to me anymore because I've been around so damn long. But you walk in and they look at you and go, "Okay, so before you record your scene, let's just tell us how tall you are." And then you just go, "Oh, okay, they have a short leading man. This isn't going to work out for me," because it's very hard to put two people in the same frame if they are a foot and a half different in height. So
and you play a lot of authority figures, a lot of cops, a lot of soldiers. You play Tommy Franks in W. So is that, you think, in part because of your size, or do you think is it more like just your appearance looks, authoritative or something?
Well, I think size is part of it. I'm a big, old, scary white guy. I mean, that's who those authority figures tend to be. I mean, the business is changing for the better, thank God, and things are being a little more inclusive. But it was lucky for me, of being a middling talent and looks, that I lost my hair when I was 25, 26 years old, and that doesn't, you don't see a lot of that in film and TV, and yet because I have a pretty big, deep voice. Before I really got started acting in film and television, I did plays and I did a lot of classical plays, but I spent 3 years at NYU and I got a master's degree in acting and a lot of training, vocal training. And so if you're a big, strong white guy with a deep, strong voice, it helps if you're trying to play a senator or a general or a chief of police or a detective or, you name it. And again, for better or worse, when I was coming up, most of the stories that were being told, most of the shows that were on TV were cop shows and military shows, things like JAG or Law and Order, or, there's that kind of stuff. So it was easy to sort of fit me in, and I did a lot of small parts in film and TV where I just said a few things, but was basically there just to be strong and threatening. So that's kind of been my wheelhouse. Now that I'm getting older, I'm out of my cop phase and I passed through the detective phase, and I'm occasionally the chief of police phase, but I'm quickly heading into my victim phase. So we'll see. But yeah.
So you've got, at least 30 movies on your credits. And again, like I stopped reading, but there's all kinds of stuff that we've all seen. 13 Days, another great movie. I mean, that's just fantastic. When you're sitting around on these sets, do you often go back and just think back to, like, I'm from fucking Benicia. How am I sitting on the same set?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's constant. I know often people say that they're humbled when they mean exactly the opposite, but I know where I came from, and I know how lucky I was, and I know that this is a series of accidents and some real benevolence on the part of teachers of mine, whether in high school or particularly in college. I just got lucky, and I got lucky in a lot of ways. I got lucky, as I said before, because I was big, strong, healthy, male, white. I got lucky because I grew up in California where going to a major university cost almost nothing.
Right.
And so I was able to put myself through a phenomenal university without having to worry about coming out with a crushing load of debt. And so I felt like I could study anything that I wanted to study, and it wasn't going to set me back for the rest of life. For the rest of my life, it would set me up. So I went to UC Davis. I went, 45 minutes down the road from home.
Right.
to a university with 20,000 undergraduates. I played a little football, but that really wasn't what I was there to do. And so I got to freely explore, sort of with impunity, different departments of the university and get a sort of traditional liberal arts education. And that set me up to sort of be able to sort of thrust myself into whatever direction, whatever opportunity was created for me, because I had a certain confidence that came with being relatively well educated on a broad scale. I could talk about lots of different things to lots of different people. And when it came time to pivot, as I did in my senior year of college, and start acting a little bit, I just always knew that if it didn't work out, if the shit really hit the fan, I'd go back and do what I wanted to do, and I'd be happy about that. I'd go be a teacher, go be a coach, and get involved in educational policy, maybe even politics. But as it turned out, I just kind of kept getting luckier and luckier, and work made more work, and I kind of grew into my old man authoritative body while doing theater around the country. I mean, I got out of graduate school when I was 27, and one of my first job, I was brought into one of our teachers at NYU. Rosemarie Tischler was the casting director at the New York Shakespeare Festival, otherwise known as the Public Theater. And she brought a handful of us in to audition for the Shakespeare in the Park. And a few of my classmates, and we were only 16 in the class, but a small handful of my classmates got hired. And suddenly I was understudying Morgan Freeman in Taming the Shrew and playing a small part. And mostly I got to, while working and while getting paid to work as an actor, I got to watch pros.
Yeah.
Really do their thing. And I learned right away from New Yorkers, people who committed their lives to theater, who were now in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, how they went about their business. I just leapt right into it. And then another teacher at school, a guy named Michael Kahn, who ran the Shakespeare Theater at the Folger Library down in Washington, D.C., is now just called the Shakespeare Theater. He offered me a season. So he offered me 4 plays. I wound up doing 3, but he offered me 4 plays down in Washington. So I went straight from the Park doing Shakespeare in front of 2,000 people every night, outdoors. I went down to Washington and again, just sort of continued to make my living doing sort of small, medium-sized parts in great plays with great people. And I just kind of kept doing that. I went on tour for a year with a Neil Simon play. I just kind of kept doing that stuff because I was a 27, 28-year-old bald guy. Just like it didn't really I didn't make sense on film and television until I got into my 30s. But by that point, I had this wealth of experience and further education from traveling all around the country, doing great plays with great professionals. And then, at that point, I did a handful of things, but I did the pilot of The Sopranos and, Law and Order. Really back then too, there were only in New York. If you wanted to live in New York, there were only about 3 or 4 shows that were shooting in New York at the time. There was a couple. There was Law and Order, and then there became Law and Order SVU, and then there was The Sopranos, and there was Ed. I don't know if you remember Ed, but that was on for a bit. That was around, and there were a couple more things, but that was it. And so, if you were living in New York, you were here to be a theater person, and then those bits of television could give you enough quick money that you could afford to live in New York as a theater person. And then, things changed. And then I got married and I had a couple kids, but we lived in New York. So
Yeah.
I had to sort of figure out how to make that make sense financially, because now I had three other people to support and look after. And so at that point, I really just focused on film and television because the money's quicker. It's better all the way around. And most importantly, actually, once you do it, what's that?
Let me jump in here so yeah, you're right. Like when you're getting started and there's no real risk, you can lean on that potential of the UC Davis degree. But now, yeah, there's three of you besides you living in New York and everything. Let's go back in time a little bit, and or actually maybe in this case forward in time a little bit, where you kept getting lucky. You know, you got breaks and that kind of thing. Was there a break where after that point, like breaks just weren't needed anymore? You had broken out. Can you talk about that?
No. That never really. I think there's a real myth around the business, because what most people really know about our stars and movie stars, and they're really only. We're talking about a few dozen people on the planet who have security,
right?
In terms of employability. We won't get into this because it's no fun. But I could name you. I mean, literally, I could name you 100 people who I've worked with who were genius actors who had 20-year careers where they worked, and suddenly the breaks. Somehow it just didn't. The sense of trajectory was gone. I think there's a myth around trajectory that gets peddled by agents and publicists. You just have to keep going and going and going. That's not to say that I don't. It is true that I get more offers now, straight offers now than I used to.
Right.
But I also am constantly auditioning. There's just as a sort of funny side note, it's a very, very different world now with these phones that can record us, because now you can kind of live anywhere.
Yeah.
And you can record an audition and send it in. And sometimes they're just happier to do that rather than setting up an appointment to have you come in. You can just record yourself an audition. But I do it all the time. I put myself on tape for something last week that I did not get, sadly. But as the stuff gets better, as the jobs are better and better and more coveted, and there's a lot of people who want them,
right?
It's harder to get a straight offer. So you got to get out there and, convince them that you're the guy. So no, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't better now than it was 20 years ago. It is for me. I mean, I definitely have a body of work that if somebody says, hey, you know what we need? We need a 50 to 60-year-old scary guy who we can believe abused, somebody at some point, then I might just get the call and get asked to do it.
Yeah. Well,
where I am now is I'm trying to do other stuff. I'm trying to do stuff that people don't necessarily, they haven't seen me do 1,000 times. And so that requires me convincing people that I have stuff in my bag of tricks that they may not be as familiar with. So, because frankly, playing horrible people over and over and over again is taking a toll. And I'm on a show right now called Strange Angel for CBS All Access, where I just play a horrible, horrible, horrible person. And I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to. I don't want to live in that. I don't want to live in that skin. I don't want to say those things or think those thoughts or pretend to be that guy who treats people the way that guy treats people. And so,
is it just that role though, or is it like because Powers Booth kind of comes to mind as you describe all these kind of people. He was just always going to play, people like Curly Bill. Like he's just like, he can play that guy and you just hate him on the screen and you can make a lot of money like that. But on the other side,
I worked with Powers on a Van Damme movie a long time ago. And he and I were in a car together. It was a very strange situation where the production was actually in a little bit of trouble. So a doctor came and diagnose Powers with some kind of flu that he did not have, so that the production could get an extra day of insurance money and get him out of trouble. That's a real thing that happened. And I only tell the story now. Powers is long gone. But so we were sitting in the back of a car while the doctor came in to, in quotes, look at Powers. And we were just sort of stuck there, and he's willing to go along with it. And it took me a while to figure out what was actually happening right in front of me. So I'd never seen anything like that. But we started talking, and I asked him, I said, do you know what you're doing after this? And he said, in 35 years of doing this, Michael, I have never, ever once known what I was doing next. Like, there's a guy who you just throw his name out, and I know who he is, and most people would know who he is.
Sure.
And he never knew what was coming next.
Right.
But Powers is fucking scary to look at. I mean, he just seemed like a scary dude. Now, he was a wonderful guy to work with on set. I mean, he was a pro, and he was just kind and easygoing. But I wasn't going to fuck with him. That's for sure. You know, he had that in him. But we talked about his early days of theater. The guy, Michael Kahn, who I mentioned earlier, who brought me down to the Shakespeare Theater at the Folger, was Powers' first director at the Stratford Theater Festival in Connecticut when Michael was the artistic director. So, like, we even had that connection. I mean, that guy, Powers Booth, was doing Shakespeare as a young, handsome, leading man. And sometimes you just start out, and if you're good, and Powers is great, if you're good, and you're beautiful, which he was when he was a young man, then you get cast in these sort of romantic leads and whatnot. And then you grow up and you get some notches in your belt. You're 20 years old, some rings around the trunk, and they're like, oh, you're scary. And then suddenly he's playing Jim Jones, and he's in Deadwood and doing all that horrible stuff that he was amazing. I admired him a lot. I wish I'd gotten to spend more time with him before he passed. Yeah.
No, he seems like an interesting guy. And like you said, a well-established career, but shocking that he didn't know what was coming next. But, I guess that's just how it is for, really almost anybody, right? Like, how many people who are listening to this are have at least 20% tension about losing their job in the very near future, whether it's real or not.
I think, it is real. And I think that it's very different than how, I don't know if it's that different from how our parents grew up. It's certainly different from how our parents' grew up. But I think it's also true about our own parents. I mean, my parents would be in their late 70s, early 80s now. And there was a certain security with jobs, and it was before a time of corporate sort of takeovers and downsizing and all of that kind of stuff that's going on in the world now. And I think people, certainly the generation younger than us, are not growing up with any sense that whatever job they have will ever be their last job. I think that for our parents' generation, if you were 30 years old and you were in a job, particularly if you were 30 years old and you were starting a job, that was probably where you were going to finish. Well, there's no expectation of that culturally in this country. I think that's pretty much the same throughout Europe as well. It's a different world.
Yeah, interesting. I want to go back to the playing villains real quick because you're right. There's something I've heard about that, and also I've heard a lot about this. Auditioning via iPhone, and that's fascinating. But I want to get into this thing because we had Dominic Santana on, and if anybody looks up Dominic Santana, you will understand that he's always going to be available to play Suge Knight. And I think he's 3 different separate productions. He's played Suge Knight in those movies. Because sometimes you're a doppelganger for somebody who's notorious or famous or whatever, and so. I asked him about this, like when you play someone, and Suge Knight, let's just be honest, that guy has, I'll be nice and say, questionable means of getting things done. Sure. But he does horrible things to people for business. And granted that's a real thing that really happens. He uses violence. Other people use other tools, but he has to enter that guy's space and really, I don't know how method he is, but he really is more on that end of the spectrum where he really has to do this. And he's like, yeah, I worry that I'm damaging myself in some way because I have to enter this character all the time. And it is how I make money. It's how I get other opportunities by playing these roles and being seen. Hey, this is P.A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here. And if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about roles and being seen. Out of the guy he's a giant of a man, just a big, huge guy. So is that sort of what you're describing when you talk about, or is it just this one role? I mean, just because you play a cop doesn't mean...
It's cumulative, but you get breaks from it here and there, and there are other factors that sort of make it more or less able to shrug off, depending on how much work, how much rest. I'm working on something right now where I'm commuting to Budapest, and I'm fucked up for 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
And whenever I land in either direction, and in this case, I'm not playing a particularly bad guy, but if I was, I know it would get under my skin in ways that are different than if I get to come home every night and get, loving from my wife and family and that kind of stuff. It is a little different. But the part that I most recently played, I just referenced the Strange Angel thing, was in Los Angeles. So I was commuting to that. So I was doing that, and I was home, maybe 3 or 4 days every 2 weeks for about 4 or 5 months, and that included flying back and forth across the country. And I'm not. I mean, I know people talk about the method. Nobody's really method anymore. It was a way of working. It was a very particular, specific way of working, but. It's too hard to sustain that on a 12-hour day for 5 days a week. So, but whether or not you're quote unquote method, the fact is you're saying that thing and you're thinking those thoughts, and I'm not familiar enough with sort of the language of psychology, but there's a way that it works on you, kind of retroactively or like just the fact that you're living in that world and thinking those thoughts, it can make you feel awful over time. It just kind of makes you sick. It's like coming in contact with bad air or bad water for a long time. So it does require, for me anyway, and I know others, I've talked to a bunch of different people about this kind of thing, it just requires downtime. It requires transition. Sometimes it requires a shave and a haircut. Literally. I mean, I was on the movie of The Crucible 100 years ago, and with Daniel Day-Lewis, and I played a guy who kind of started out good and got swept up in all the nonsense, and by the end of it, I was hanging Daniel Day-Lewis and arresting Joan Allen and just being an overall piece of shit. And when the thing was over, and it was a profound experience for lots and lots of reasons. My son was born while we were doing it. Lots of things were great about it. I mean, it was an amazing experience. I mean, one of the best experiences I've ever had. However, playing that guy, when it was over, I got home and I was kind of a mess, and I kept looking at myself, and I hadn't shaved in 4 months, and I hadn't cut my hair in 4 months, and I was like, yeah, I got to get rid of this. And I just went to it was actually the only place where we were that was open was a very kind of old lady salon. And this woman said, sit down, honey, I'll take care of you. And she cut my hair down to like a 1 or a 1.5 buzz cut.
Yeah.
She gave me a shave. She gave me my first ever professional shave. Got rid of all that stuff, and I looked up, and I was not that guy anymore. It was weird, and I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I felt a load off psychologically. I can't completely explain it, but it was the beginning of sort of few days later, I was kind of back to myself. But it's a weird thing when you pretend to be somebody. You know, like when you were a kid, and you didn't want to go to school, and you pretended to be sick.
Yeah.
After a little while, you feel a little sick.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's true. Like if you really commit, you know, you find yourself suddenly taking a nap, a thing that you didn't even want to do as a kid ever.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like that. It's a grown up version of that. You play those things, you say those things, you're miserable to people, you're a sadist, you're a pedophile, whatever, you know, it's fucking gross. You know, it's not easy.
Nice. It's something you don't think about with playing those roles, that there is some damage and some baggage to carry around. We had just this week, we put up a show with a guy named Matt Polkamp, and he was a former pro. I guess he's technically still a pro, but BMX racer, you know, like just actual BMX. And he was so singular and focused, and that has a fairly short shelf life in terms of, you know, being inspired and,
Sure.
you know, having it not become a job. And so he started acting to get away from it, because those things are wildly different. And the acting was sort of like therapy for the BMX rider in him. And now that he's, you know, in his late 40s, you know, in BMX, like he gets paid to go ride every night, but his job, he's an actor, but he rides his bike as therapy from his acting.
Right. Sure.
And so how does that resonate with you?
Well, I think there's, I mean, it's whether you're a stockbroker or an actor or a BMX rider or whatever, a little bit of exercise can, I think, transition you from whatever world you're in to the next world and make it possible. And if you're built the way I am, still at 56, which is, I'm still fairly shoddily built by this point, but I was in my bones. I was an athlete as a kid and played 3 sports in high school and 2 in college. And I still would play pickup basketball if I wasn't afraid that every tendon below my waist would blow out all at the same time. But when I do that kind of stuff, I feel like a different person. I feel like I can sort of transition into whatever it is I need to do at home and be with the people I need to be with at home more easily. Truth is, I don't do that enough. I'm not conscious about that enough. I try to, when I'm out working, I try to go for, even if it's a 10-minute swim at the end of a workday. But, you know, the way that our schedules tend to be, particularly in the States, not so much when you're shooting in Europe, is that you finish at all sorts of crazy weird hours, and that sort of stuff is really hard to do. And that contributes, I think, to part of the, you know, the sort of difficulty transitioning, is that everybody's just fucked up all the time from working 12 and 14-hour days and beginning, you know, that thing that Powers and we were working on, they were working 14, 15-hour days. But they would maintain what's called the turnaround time, where from when actors would leave to when they could be brought back is 12 hours, or you have to pay a bunch of extra money. So we would begin at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, or say we'd begin at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. We wouldn't finish that night until 9, right? Having worked 14 hours. So the next day they couldn't call us until 9, and then you would finish at 11 or 12. And then the next day they would call you at noon or 1, and then you would work until 4 in the morning. So and then you come back, you'd finish Friday / Saturday at 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. You'd have your 36-hour weekend, and you come back and start on Monday at 5 or 6 or 7 in the morning. And that puts everybody in a perpetual state of jet lag. Everybody, the crew, and everybody. And just speaking specifically about what we were just talking about, if you're playing somebody who's really awful and you're trying to have some kind of exercise regime that's what keeps you safe and sane, how the hell are you going to do that?
Right.
You know, it's really, really hard. A lot of actors just do it at their lunch, or they do it while they're between scenes. They might get a half hour, but even that, like, there's nowhere to shower, there's nowhere to clean up, and
Right.
you have to be physically able to run through the woods and chase the bear or whatever the fuck you're doing at 2:00 in the morning in a way that's safe and where you have a lot of energy, like it's happening for the first time. So it's it's a bit of a tricky balance to stay sort of physically healthy and mentally healthy and give yourself the transitions you need to come back and be fresh every day. And most of the time, the actors aren't the ones, like, we might work 3 out of those 5 days or 2 out of those 5 days. Occasionally you're the guy who works 5 out of 5 days.
Right.
And that's really, really hard. But the crew is there before you get there. They leave after you're gone as an actor.
That's crazy.
Those
So
people,
let me. So I want to.
They work crazy hours.
Yeah, I mean those guys for sure work crazy hours, and they don't make crazy money. They make regular people money. But let me let me put some context into what you're talking about, because the same thing applies to combat, right? So I get ready to go out. I need to be fully provisioned in terms of food and water before I go, and I'm going to bring some stuff with me. But you might be out indefinitely. You know, there's not a union, so you know you have the right amount of food in you, so you can go and walk for hours up and down hills and all that kind of thing. But you also bring just enough because you don't want too much weight, right? Everything you bring adds weight to what you're doing. And so, like, I'm thinking about Afghanistan when I was in this one area. Is like I would have a giant pig in a blanket. I'd eat that thing. I would drink a full quart of water, take a second one to try to get that in me before we went on patrol. Like, so within that hour, I have 2 quarts of water just in my body, and then bring another, water vessel with me. But also, like, if you were to change your workout up, like if you wanted to try P90X, Beachbody, you had to be really careful, because if you were sore everywhere and stiff and unable to move or whatever, or heaven forbid you got injured, while you were out because you changed your workout up, that's not pro. That's rookie. That's like going by and eating a red vine every time you go by Crafty's table. You're like, I'll take a Danish and a red vine. Like you can't eat like that and continue to work, in front of a camera if you're constantly jamming red vines in your mouth. So it's these things apply to the regular world. It's interesting as you describe all this. Gosh, I want to ask you more about the day-to-day, but let me, because we're going to run out of time if I keep wandering down this rabbit hole. But you've worked with Ong Lee, Ron Howard. I mean, these are household names, right? Ridley Scott, Oliver Stone, Steven Spielberg. There's all kinds of names that and I'm leaving a lot of directors out of this list, but to illustrate the point that you don't know what's next, I don't see a single director that you've worked with twice. And maybe I'm missing something, but it doesn't seem like that's a thing. So it's not like you belong to a director who's always gives you jobs, but also who gets you the best out of that whole list of people, those 30 plus different directors. Talk to me about the experience with those guys.
Well, there's been a handful of people who I've worked with more than once, but it's true. You just kind of go from thing to thing to thing. But I mean, it is. Now, there's so many different ways to talk about that, but it's been an incredible privilege to watch some of these people who are masters. They're not just big names. They're big names because they really, really, really know what they're doing. Ridley Scott, I've worked with a handful of times now because I've also done stuff for his television company and film stuff with him. I worked with him in Morocco. I worked with him all over the place. Anyway, actually, no, I'm not going to talk about him. I'll talk about Steven Spielberg, because that was recent enough that it's really, really fresh in my mind. What the thing that struck me the most about Steven was how much joy he took in his work. And here's a guy, I mean, I don't know how old Steven is, but he's in his late 60s, early 70s. He's spent 45 years making film. And he was, I mean, literally rolling around on the ground, looking to see where the best camera angle was, and just laughing and screaming for Janusz Kaminski, his DP, to come look at Janusz, come look at this. Oh my God, it's beautiful. Okay, great. Okay, good. And he was just so thrilled about the chase for him of kind of the perfect image for the story that he was trying to tell. And it's easy to get jaded. It's easy to get sort of over it. And to watch somebody who's a master and who's a mogul and a kingpin and he's an emperor with a huge empire. And but for him, what really thrills him is getting his dad, who he still travels with. He brings his dad over to the monitor so his dad can watch, and then he goes to work and figures it out. He is demanding. You need to have your shit together. Do not be the person who doesn't know their lines. Do not be the person who holds him up. But if you have a question, there's no bad question. He'll answer your question. Like, just, there's a way that he has figured out. You don't create all that he's created at the level that he's created. Wherever you think of individual films or whatever, that guy is a master who's been doing it forever. And just shut up and listen to what he has to say. Yeah. And do what he says. Just do what he says. When you're in the hands of a master, you're not going to know a better way. Do what he says.
That's a great point, man.
And it'll lead you. No doubt, it'll lead you to something that never occurred to you. Right. That's better than what you made up at home. But also, it's probably better than what he thought of because he's not in your brain. So if you sort of translate what he says through yourself, you wind up with something that even surprises Steven. I mean, I'll give you a concrete example of that. When I enter that movie, Bridge of Spies, I come into this hotel room. There's a bunch of young pilots, and they've all been chosen to be in this secret program. They don't know anything about what's going on. And I have a page and a half of a speech about what their life is going to be. And I was scared shitless that I was going to not know my lines, and which, by the way, does not get easier the older you get. I got in there. Steven told me to come in and just stand there. And he didn't tell those guys that I was just going to stand there and not start. He wanted an awkward moment. He could catch it. I came in and I stood there, and they looked at me and I looked at them. And then they looked at me and I looked at them. I didn't move. And I thought, oh, that's the awkward moment. That's great. Nope. Don't speak. And I just stayed there, and it's crazy, but he holds that scene completely until they decide to get up and I tell them to get back down. But it's like, for that movie, which is sort of a fast-paced spy kind of thing, the whole movie comes to a screeching fucking halt while they wait to figure out what the hell this big guy is going to say to them. He thought of it, I extended it, and then it winds up being, that's the shot. That's the shot that he wound up keeping and not even cutting into or out of. He just let it be this horrible, long, uncomfortable pause for these boys. So, I don't know. I have tremendous affection for Steven and his just his commitment, just the depth and breadth of his commitment. I mean, and also, I mean, Ridley's like 80, and he's got a TV empire and a film empire, and he just keeps going. He keeps doing stuff that's interesting to him. Honor seems a little grand, but it's been a real honor to spend time working with masters. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what I was hoping to hear, because we could talk about a lot of different directors from your list, because there are so many of them. I mean, I didn't even list, 90% of them, like with Peter Berg and all those guys, how, there's just so much context and interesting things as you work in your professional space. I love those insights that actors bring in. I wanted to ask you about, you're constantly working. I mean, pretty much a film a year, if not a little more than that. And then also simultaneously, you're always doing TV. And you were in the pilot episode of The Americans, and the actual true life Russian spy has been on this show, by the way. So that's kind of
no kidding.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny thing. When you look at your whole body of work, what for you, you're like, oh man, that was the best gig I ever had. Like it just, it was a blast. Because you're a lot of times you're in there for a short amount of time, 7 episodes, 1 episode, 15 episodes. Mm-hmm. What stands out in terms of your body of work?
Well, different things stand out for different reasons. As I was saying, when I was younger, I felt like on a Crucible, I had probably 5 lines or 6 lines, but I was there for 12 weeks.
Right.
And I got to watch, because I was just around and I was a presence, and I was basically the cop, in the Crucible, blacksmith / cop arresting witches on horseback. Right. But I got to watch masters. I got to watch Daniel Day-Lewis do his stuff every day. I got to watch Paul Scofield, do his stuff every day. And I learned stuff from Paul that I think about every single day that I'm on a set. And Joan Allen and different people like that. But that was more about, I felt like I was in school, and the best kind of school imaginable, where you actually get paid on a beautiful island off the coast of Massachusetts. Lately, it's been more about just purely the quality of the material and the people who are involved. And for me, the thing that's been the most exciting in that way in the last 10, 15 years was The Leftovers for HBO. Speaking of Peter Berg, who directed the pilot and the first episode after the pilot, it was just a depth and breadth to the writing that I've not ever experienced, actually, before or since, where I could not wait to get my hands on the next script to see what they were going to come up with. I mean, scripts that I wasn't even in. I asked them to send me the scripts for the second season, which I wasn't in, and they put me on the list, and so I got to read and follow along with what was happening, and then to be able to step in and play somebody that crazy, that weird, but that connected. And again, I'm working with just wonderful. I mean, Justin Theroux is just a fantastic dude, and he was who I did most of my stuff with. But we had phenomenal directors come through there. So that's the thing that when people, I get recognized a lot, but nobody knows what my name is. It's really, they're just like, you're that guy.
You're that guy.
Thing.
Yeah.
And working in Budapest has been really weird that way, because The Leftovers has clearly taken the Hungarians by storm. I didn't anticipate it, because I'm getting people who know me and my name and what I've done while walking down the streets in Budapest. People are following me and stopping me and being very sweet, very kind. Nobody's been weird or anything. It's just been gratifying, because it is the thing that I think I'm the most proud of.
Yeah. That Mark Valley has a story like that, where he was in Africa in a cab, and it's the same kind of thing, where forget that your movies play all over the world, and all of a sudden, you show up and you're thrust back into your character of I don't know, captain of the USS Pierce from 13 Days. They're like, you're the captain,
right? Yeah,
and you're really that person in that time.
You never know what it is.
Yeah.
I did 2 episodes of Prison Break. And I played a terrible guy, but it was fun. But that was, that was 13, 14, 15 years ago. I mean, a long time ago. Yeah. And people, that's a thing that seems to have just like all over town. That's people like, you're that guy from Prison Break. Like, yeah, I guess that's true.
Well, let me tell you, you are that guy, because my co-founder of the show, John Leon Guerrero, grew up in Vallejo. His wife is from Benicia. She and I grew up together. John, I said, hey, we've got Michael Gaston going on. He's like, oh, I loved him in Prison Break.
I know. See, I mean, Go figure.
Yeah,
you never know what's gonna land.
And I guess since we're talking about Benicia again, I should also say I put a little thing on Facebook that I was going to be talking to you. So Darla Katie has said, hey, I wanted me to make sure I sent a shout out to you. And also Rob Yarbrough.
God, Darla.
Yeah, Darla
was my neighbor across the street growing up for a while.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So she said, hey, and then Rob Yarbrough said that you were one of his mentors growing up, and he grew up in that part of town over there where you're from. And, it's just, I think it'll be fun for folks in the old town to be able to hear from you and understand that, like, you really have done incredible, man. I mean, Ally McBeal, on and on. There's so many different things. I wanted to ER. How about ER? It is another great show that everybody knows the name of. Elementary, another great show. So
I think ER with Steve Buscemi. How weird is that?
Oh, wow.
Steve Buscemi. It was me and Steve Buscemi doing ER together.
Yeah.
How wacky is that?
Yeah, it is wacky. Yeah. So when I look at your body of work, again, every year you're working on, several something. Some years, like when you're with The Unforgettable, you've got 22 episodes, and so you're working that whole year. But how much do you need to work? And I'm not trying to get into your money, man. I'm just trying to get a sense of things.
Yeah.
Like if you book a couple episodes of 24, like in 2010, and a movie, is that plenty of work for you for the year? Or are you augmenting it with things that aren't available in your IMDb? Like, are you doing plays and everything?
It's definitely not enough, particularly if you got two kids and you're trying to put them through college.
Right.
In this country, my son is graduated. He's out of college now, and my daughter's in college. No, it's never enough. I live in New York, not a cheap place to live.
Right.
But as I sort of alluded to, when you stop doing plays as your full-time thing and you do film and television, you do get residuals. It's one of the most important things about the union that we belong to, that we've been able to protect the fact that when they sell and resell and resell and replay and sell overseas our stuff, we get a little taste. So, it's no insignificant part of my income, the residual part of it, and so royalties, for lack of a better word, we call them residuals. So that's a big thing. No, I have to keep working. Now, the reality is for some of us, certainly my reality is now I'm 56. I'm almost 57.
Yeah.
I'm out from under a lot of the things that I needed to spend decades saving for.
Right.
And I can be a little bit more selective. Ironically, of course, this is when jobs are coming to me faster than they did when I really needed them. And I get paid a little more now because I've been doing it forever. So
right.
That's just the situation. But I am trying to do some more theater. I am trying to stay home. This commute to Budapest has just been killing me. Again, I'm not a kid. I'm not as spry as I was, and doing that 2 flights and an overnight flight to go there and work for 3 or 4 days and turn around and come back is pretty brutal on my old body. So what I'd like to do, what I'm trying to do, I did a play last year at Playwrights Horizons, amazing play by a writer named Craig Lucas that was half in sign language. So I had to learn, most of my dialogue was in sign language.
Wow.
So I had to learn that for that. I had no experience with that. And we were working with a great many of the actors were sort of on the sort of deafness spectrum of, from hard of hearing all the way to deaf 100%. We're working with all these amazing actors from all over the country. And that was great for my brain. It was great for my creative soul. It was the biggest creative challenge I've had in decades.
Wow.
I made $650 a week before taxes and before commissions and before, so that's the reality is I took home about $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
And so that really isn't a vocation. That's an avocation. That's a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
So before that, it had been 4 or 5 years that I did a play I did a play with Tom Hanks on Broadway called Lucky Guy, and that paid better. But as I said, you finish a play, you finish a nice long one on a play, and it's amazing. And you meet all these amazing people, and you get to do it in front of 1,500 or 2,000 people every night. But when it's over, it's over. There's no residuals on a play. There's nothing like that. So you just kind of have to build your strategy, your financial strategy, pick your spots, and then hope that when you've made enough for a while, that a good play will come along. But sometimes it just doesn't. So, I've spent my life not knowing where I was going to pull the rabbit out.
Yes.
From. But I'm not. This is not euphemizing. I have been very lucky, and I've tried to be smart, and I've gotten help planning finances and things like that. But I've been able to sort of make it work. So touch wood. I'm looking for wood where I am right now, but it will keep going like that. But so far so good.
I don't want to ask too many more questions because I've had you for about an hour, but I do want to say like, is there something creatively that's next for you? I mean, as you get older, at some point, the roles, you become less and less desirable because you're 65, 70. Some people can still work. Heck, Anthony Hopkins is on a brand new thing on Amazon, right? So some people are able to work.
My son just did a pilot. My son's an actor. He just started his first real job, and he worked with Judd Hirsch. Yeah. Who's 80, 89 or something like that.
Yeah. So do you intend just to keep working until you don't get roles, or do you want to get like into your wife's line of work and maybe write your own plays or whatever?
I mean, I've written some stuff. I've optioned some books. I want to create my own stuff, but it doesn't burn in me in the way that it does for what I'd say is a real writer. Like I have some ability as a writer, and I enjoy it. I have a sort of Ewan McGregor's a really good friend of mine, and we've been trying to get something made for a long time, and we can't get it made. And at this moment, who knows if we will or not? But we've been trying to. I try to get things going here and there. I've performed. I performed a monologue that I wrote for myself, kind of a Spalding Gray thing that I did a few years ago. I've got a new one that I'm working on right now. It's really just to keep myself sane by controlling my own ability to create. If things aren't actually coming my way that are creative, I can at least have something that I can do that makes me feel better to work on. And my best friend runs a theater up in way upstate New York, and I'm going to go up there and workshop it for a couple of days in front of a handful of people, and we'll see. It'll never be a thing that becomes a movie or TV. It'll never be a thing probably that ever sees the light of day, but it keeps me going. In terms of working forever, I'll work forever. I'll never retire. I love what I do. I mean, I love what I do. And I love that I meet new, crazily creative, intelligent people all the time.
Yeah.
And I get sent to cool places, and I'd like to spend more time with my wife. I would like us not to be in different places all the time, but her career is really taking off, and she's crazy busy with that. And so that's part of what's motivating my desire to just sort of try to say no to some things.
Yeah.
And work here and work out of the New York area, or at least the northeastern part of the United States,
right,
or the southeastern part of Canada, if that's what it takes, and not be taking every single job that comes along. The last 5 years, I did Man in the High Castle in Vancouver. I commuted to that. I did Strange Angel in LA. I commuted to that. I'm doing Treadstone, this new thing for USA in Budapest. I'm commuting to that. it's not really what people think of when they think of commuting. They think of maybe getting from Pasadena into West Hollywood, but it's for me, it's a passport experience and an overnight flight. And I'm so grateful to have the work, but that part's wearing me out a little bit.
Yeah,
that part's wearing me out. I must admit. It does.
Yeah. Well, I mean, every job has its things, you know, even if it's something that you love, that you do, you know, getting all of that sorted out at some point. We had Mark Schulman. He drums for people like Pink and just massive acts. And he's like, You don't pay me to drum. Of course I can drum. I've got the resume that proves that. You pay me to be gone from my kids and my wife. You pay me for the inconvenience of being on the road, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have thought to put it that way, but I think that's really right. I mean, I don't know about Mark, but also he's probably being somewhat, what's the word? He's underselling his value as a musician. He's also somebody who they pay because he can step into any situation, figure out what the music is, and jump right in and play it and sound like the last person who drummed for Pink, so that it doesn't freak Pink out, it doesn't freak anybody else out.
For sure,
who's a fan. And that's one of the things that I get paid for now. Is it people know what they're going to get.
Yeah.
They know I'm going to be early. They know I'm going to know my line. I'm not going to get in a fight with anybody. I know how to do my shit, and I will save them money.
Yeah,
because I'll have thought ahead, and I'll have figured out that this might be a problem. What if I did it this way? This might save you a shot. This might save you some time.
Right.
And I'm going to know how to. I have a track record of getting along with people.
It turns out that's valuable.
It turns out that's really valuable.
Yeah.
You know, because it's not just because stars are difficult or some sort of horseshit like that. If you're, and this is the worst example because he's the best example, but if you're Tom Hanks, the entire production hinges on you.
Right.
They got financing. They got $70 million because you said yes.
Yeah.
Right? A bank gave them money because you said yes. The whole fucking thing hinges on you. If you suck, the whole world's going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? Everything. That's a tremendous amount of pressure, no matter how. There's no amount of money that makes that go away. There's none. It just doesn't. You either know how to handle it. You're either a good person. You're either emotionally stable and kind, or you're not.
Yeah.
In the case of Tom, he's one of the most emotionally stable, kind, intelligent, talented people I've ever been around. So he can carry that weight. If you're on a TV show and you've got somebody who's new and they're carrying a show, their picture is on the bus, on the ad, on the bus as it drives by, right? But that person's 26 years old.
Oh, boy.
And they just got out of drama school and they've never done this before. It's no less pressure than it is than on Tom. But this person doesn't necessarily, we don't know, have the tools. So if I'm going to come in, if they've got a scene with their father, who's also the boss cop or whatever,
right?
They might just get Gaston to do it because he's going to be kind. He's going to help that person. He's going to know his lines. He'll be willing to go first and shoot my coverage so that person can rehearse while we're shooting my coverage and learn their stuff. I'm not going to give them a hard time. I'm not going to lash out. That's valuable. That's a real. That's money.
Who knew that being prepared and agreeable was such a valuable thing? You know, I've heard this over and over again. That knowing your lines is a differentiator in Hollywood. You would think that'd be just required, but almost every actor we've had on has said the same thing. Like, I always know my lines. I'm always prepared.
Well, it absolutely is a prerequisite. But I'll give you an example. Johnny Lee Miller and I worked on Hackers, however many years ago that was, when he was a kid and Angelina Jolie was a kid. And we shot it in New York and we shot it in London, and he and I got really friendly, and he was a lovely, lovely young man. However many years later, I did that Sherlock Holmes show with him.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw that ever, but Johnny he was working 5 days a week, 12 hours a day, basically. And he carried 80% of the dialogue. Lucy had far less to say. And he had to be a genius who knew everything about everything. And the style of the show is the guy talked a million miles an hour. Now, if he's working 60 hours a week, when the fuck is that guy going to go learn his lines?
Yeah.
How's that going to happen?
Yeah.
What sort of pressure is that?
That's all
and
of
you
the
got to
pressure.
carry the show. And you got to carry the show. You're on the bus. They want you to do promotional stuff, and you're doing 22 episodes a year.
Yeah.
That's 10 and a half months of that unstopping grind.
Yeah.
So if you hire a guy to come in to be whatever, the bad guy that week, if I come in and I don't have my shit together, what does that do for Johnny? What if it extends the day by half an hour?
Right.
I mean, it's going to make people's head explode.
Yeah.
And I understand it. I do understand it. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to be to be on Jericho and be on some big ensemble show where you're working 2-3 days a week, some long days. But even if it's a long day, there's 12 of you there, and so all the work is pretty split up. That's a very different thing than being Columbo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think my guess is that all that stammering and stuttering that Peter Falk did was him actually trying to remember what the fuck he had to say.
Well, listen, you've said a lot already on this show, and man, I love it. I love being able to do this like you. I get to meet the most incredible people. I was at the San Diego Natural History Museum yesterday learning about, ancient sea cows, and before that, this dude who was African royalty turned into a U.S. Navy SEAL, and today I'm talking to you. It's just, what these experiences are like. You sit across from incredible people doing incredible things, and it's such a life-fulfilling thing. So just thanks, man. Thanks for being from Benicia and coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
I'm grateful to your friend for tipping you off that I was a Panther.
Yeah. Go Panthers.